So hello everyone, we are here with Keenan Williams. He is the co-founder of Rezi, which is a real estate startup. Hey Keenan, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Can you tell us about your solution, Rezi? Why is it important, and how did you come up with the idea?
The idea came up out of trial and error. It's my second company. The first one failed miserably. After that miserable failure, my co-founder and I learned a ton. And the actual concept of Rezi is my co-founder's. One day when we lived in Silicon Valley, he came to me when an earlier version of Rezi died and we knew it wasn't going to work or scale. He said, "Hey, what if you can rent an apartment as fast as you order an Uber?" I thought he was batshit crazy. And I'm glad he was, because as we talked about it from 4:45 a.m. to 7. And in that time period, it made perfect sense. And we decided to double down on it. And we started with no apartments, no leads, no landlords, just this concept. And we tried it and it worked at a very small level. And we stayed consistent, and so it grew. That's how the company started in terms of the idea. And we wouldn't have gotten there unless we had huge failures before that. So the steps are really back 2 years before Rezi took off, in terms of failing for 2 years straight. That's how we got here. And what the company does is what I just described. We've built the first fully automated leasing platform in America, whereby anybody can walk into an apartment that's listed by Rezi, open up their phone, apply, get a decision, close, sign the lease, pay the deposit, and set their key pickup move-in date within 10 minutes, all from their cell phone, entirely digitally. So for us, the goal isn't just to create that experience, which we have, it's actually to shrink the timeline and bring it to the world. So for us, we've probably accomplished step 1 out of about 10, whereby the concept is real. Now we actually have to make it the way you actually can order an Uber, which is seconds on your phone.
Yeah, and so I know you mentioned that your first company failed miserably, and I'm assuming there were a lot of key learnings from your first company that you were able to apply to Rezi. So can you tell us about some of those?
Yeah. Always get a paying customer first. I think the most important thing for any startup founder, I don't care what the business model is. I don't care if you're a first-time founder or a multi-time founder. The most important thing when you start anything is getting a paying customer, just one. And so oftentimes I crush founders who try to talk to me and ask for advice, et cetera, because a lot of times they're coming to me without creating revenue first. I.e., my point is, if you can't create revenue with one person, you're not an entrepreneur. You should hang it up. Just stop. It's not about running a company. It's not about being a good leader. If you can't create 0 to 1, just moving one node from non-existence to existence, doesn't matter if it's $500 of revenue. You can't create revenue from one paying customer. Hang it up. The second thing I think I learned most is your co-founding team is everything. So if you don't have the ability to be led by your co-founder, or your co-founder doesn't have the ability to be led by you, there's a 99% chance you're going to fail. Period. There has to be this ridiculous mutuality when it comes to respect. And so that's a golden rule. You have to be able to, in some point in time, work for your co-founder, and your co-founder has to do the same for you in terms of the mentality. Third thing, which is really just a sub point of the co-founder piece, is you have to build a team early stage with complementary skill sets. 2, 3, 4 of you doing the same thing well, or doing the same things well in the same area, they're destined to fail because there's groupthink, there's no diversity. So early stage teams have to have ridiculous diversity. That way the skill sets are complementary. They don't step over each other's feet. They don't duplicate. Everyone kind of has their lane that they are exceptional at. And probably the last thing I learned from the miraculous failure is there is no such thing as a W without an L. So
That's pretty cool.
If you can't take the L, hang it up. You're not an entrepreneur. Fundamentally speaking, you are less likely to succeed if you get proud of yourself for going 2 for 2. The entrepreneurs that win go 2 for 50. Because going 2 for 50 shows the continuity, the commitment, the persistence, and the learning curve that happens with those 48 failures. The kids that think perfection is the wave are going to be exposed. And oftentimes I tell them, don't waste their time. Go work for someone and that could go 2 for 50. But if you think in 2 for 2 mode, you're best working in corporate America, where the opportunity to be judged and valued is people wanting you to go 2 for 2, right? Managers will give you on your review a 505 or 100% for going 2 for 2. In the world of startups and entrepreneurship, perfection's bullshit. So there's no such thing. And if you believe in it, you're already on the wrong path.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. And I know you mentioned that Rezi was initially your friend's idea. So can you tell us a little bit about the process of turning that idea into something real?
Yeah. So not just my friend, my co-founder.
Oh yeah, co-founder.
So we had just a ton of failures. The first company was my baby. I was super committed to it. I left my job for it, slept on couches for over a year. And my co-founder, who's still my co-founder today, was committed. When that idea just showed that we were too early. I mean, we're talking 2014. My first company was trying to bring commercial mortgage underwriting into the cloud so that you don't share multiple versions of Excel. Effectively, I was trying to build Airtable. Airtable today is a multi-$100 million company. Airtable in 2014 literally was my idea. Yo, we can make something that's like Google, but not all the power of Excel, but shared. It's going to change the way underwriting happens, because with commercial mortgage loans, to get $1 million loan takes the same amount of time as a $50 million loan, all because banks work at the same speed in the same way. So do investment platforms and private equity firms and everyone that touches real estate. Let's bring underwriting to the cloud. Airtable. 2014, it was just Sean and I. We didn't have capital to build Airtable. We didn't have an engineering team to build Airtable. We didn't get actually our third co-founder, our CTO, until we were on to Rezi. So my first company, yourdealclosed.com, was the most bullish thing we've ever done up until that point. And we never got our first paying customer. We built, designed, architected our asses off, but we never got our first paying customer. And when we were trying to, we only then shot for the institutional big fish. We didn't go for the small shops. So compare that to Airtable's success. They started as an engineering product. They were software first. They sold to SMBs and small enterprises. We were going after Wall Street banks. They were intelligent, smart for every way they went about it. Thus, Airtable, which I now use at Rezi, scaled. In 2014, that's what we were trying to build. So by the time we got to 2015, fall 2015, it was just obvious. yourdealclosed.com was too early, wasn't going to work. And we started Rezi, which by the time we even got to Silicon Valley, Rezi was on its 4th pivot. So when Sean said, yo, I got it, let's make renting instantaneous, like you can order seamless, that's like business model number 5 after starting Rezi. So that was a year and change into building the company. So effectively, it wasn't really just about the failures that got us here. It was probably a double-digit amount of business iterations and pivots.
Yeah, and so like, I guess your prior company was with the same co-founder? I guess, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, and, oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, that just speaks to the points I was making. If you guys can't shut something down and start something else, you're not built to be co-founders.
Oh, that's pretty true. Yeah. And so I guess like Rezi, of course, is in the real estate space. And I guess one of the biggest trends within like the past few years has been like co-living startups. Do you guys view those as like competition or?
No, they're in a different lane. Yeah. They rent out beds to roommates. Rezi rents out unfurnished apartments to long-term leaseholders only. So our tenants or our residents are 1 to 2 year leaseholders. They rent studios to 3 bedrooms as individuals or roommates. But co-living furnishes short-term leasing for individuals. And that never has been our business model, and it never will be. Co-living is just a different wave. Now, they're ancillary to us because they're in the leasing space. So they're still competition in some way, shape, or form. The same remote worker who makes six figures and is in New York City for 12 months does have an option of co-living or Rezi. So we still try to eat each other's lunch. But from a business model standpoint, they're just different. Same thing with just outright short stay rentals, right? Fully furnished short stay rentals that are fully amenitized. Another piece of our business we just don't do. So there's a lot of players in the renting space, but they fall in the different.
Yeah. And I guess one thing that you mentioned was sort of like with your prior startup, how you guys were like aiming towards serving corporations versus like Airtable, general consumers. So I guess that was like a problem that you guys faced with like making that idea scale. So can you tell us about how you went about validating problem solution fit for Rezi?
So with Rezi, product market fit really is what you just described in terms of product solutions. Product market fit came from trial and error. The beauty of that is, to your point, like Airtable, when we shut down yourdealclose.com, we started Rezi. By the time we got to the apartment renting pivot, because there were 3 pivots before that in Rezi. Rezi was originally going to do single family houses, then a mortgage play. But by the time we finally pivoted Rezi to being apartment leasing, product market fit came from one person. A phenomenal woman, our first client ever for Rezi, a landlord deep in Brooklyn, in Flatbush. She gave us a 4-bedroom, 1-bath, walk-up unit above a store. And that's how we developed product market fit. I went and cleaned it probably like 3 times, rearranged the kitchen as best as I could. Then I leased it by doing all the showings. I set up a table and chair setup with my laptop. People thought they were applying in a digitally automated fashion, when really they were just pushing numbers into a UI that my third co-founder, Hirsch, CTO, back in our office, was manually processing. And we did that a lot. We did that through our first set of double digits units. So even when we got past 10, it was still 100% manual. But effectively, product market fit was the goal. So it was all about the process of, can we complete it? Can we get a landlord to say yes? Can we process cash to the landlord? Can we then lease it up on platforms faster than normal brokers? When we show it, can we close faster with an interface that's expedient? And can we get keys faster for someone to move in? Like net, can we take that process of search through keys exchanged from 2 weeks to 2 hours? And all we cared about was that solution, 2 weeks to 2 hours. Everything else in the back end was entirely manual. And we were 100% okay with it, because that's how it's supposed to be. It wasn't about making it perfect, right, pretty. It was justifying the purpose of the product. So product market fit came from, excuse my language, just fucking doing it over and over and over and over manually without any desire to make it sexy. It was all about being functional. If you were an early Rezi resident back when we were still in Silicon Valley, so our California apartments, it wasn't automated. You knew me by name and face. You had my cell phone number. You asked me all the questions. I was support desk. Everyone back at the house was engineering and design. The rest of the teams also searched for landlords. Sean and I made cold calls 8 hours a day. Then we would go make physical offers in person all throughout San Jose to San Francisco, living in a rental car going up and down the highway. That's it. Long-winded answer, but I really wanted to make sure I give you the most detail as possible, because I think oftentimes conversations like this are full of gyms, and gyms are expensive. Gyms have a high cost, right? Because when you try to just do the gym, you're going to blow everything between the idea and reaching for the gym. I'm trying to give you the dirt. I don't want people to look for the shiny things. I want people to go through the mud inch by inch by inch by inch, because that's effectively how you create your own gyms. So hopefully in today's conversation, you don't mind if I'm long-winded.
Oh, no problem. And I know that you mentioned that Rezi was initially like your co-founder's idea. And I don't know if you necessarily had like real estate experience prior.
Well, remember, not just Rezi.
Okay.
We started Rezi together. This business model, this iteration, 100% his idea. Every time we pivot, everyone throw something out. Well, what if we do this? All right, cool, let's go test it. Okay, cool, that failed. Any other ideas? Yo, let's do this. All right, cool, let's test it. We give that a week or two. By the time Sean said, ooh, I got it, I mean, that was like Rezi idea 5, Rezi idea 6. It just so happened that that one clicked and we were able to take it off like a rocket ship. But between EuroDealClose.com and Rezi today, there's definitively like 11 or 12 business models that were tested and tried, hands down, over 4 years.
Yeah, and I just wanted to know, like, what was the process like for you in terms of like learning about the real estate market?
Well, I didn't have to. I come from commercial real estate. So the skill sets of the 3 co-founders were baked in based on our backgrounds. So I came from commercial real estate. As soon as I graduated from FAMU, shout out to FAMU and all HBCUs, Tallahassee, Florida. But when I graduated from FAMU, all my jobs, my entire career in New York City has only been really centered around commercial real estate finance. Sean's was credit, debt, mortgage finance analysis, and Hirsch is a 2-time founder and the best engineer I know. So for us, it was always building a business model around the complementary skill sets. So there was no learning curve in real estate. There was a learning curve in trying to scale a startup.
Yes. Yeah, and I know you mentioned how you acquired your first customer, but how has that like process evolved now? I know now you have like a digital platform, so is it like much easier or simpler?
So it always gets easier and simpler as time goes on and progress. I would say my answer to that is pushing to make it better has always been around the customer experience. So for us, the biggest difference between early days and today is pretty much every year, every quarter, every month, the 2 things that drove us were making the customer experience infinitely better for both landlords and tenants, and building a sustainable business model that could run. And so raising was never our North Star. My co-founding team has always been focused on how do we get to a place where we create enough recurring revenue, MRR and ARR, monthly recurring revenue and annual recurring revenue, such that we don't have to ever raise capital again. From a service standpoint, the brand we've always wanted to build has been, our Bible has been automation. So we're constantly iterating on how to just do it faster and more efficient. And the driver for all that feedback has always been our users. So for us, that still drive until we have some crazy liquidity event or Apple says, Keenan, here's 10 billion. Our North Star is always going to be that experience piece. It's very Amazon-like, where they will lose $200 million a quarter on a certain product line just to be better at capturing more of the market share for consumers, even if that market share isn't that profitable, because owning the space is their North Star. And for us, we want to be able to build a platform that allows anyone globally to rent in an automated fashion. So for us, we're playing the long game. And everything we do has a long-term thinking too.
Is it difficult running like a 2-sided platform where you serve like, of course, landlords and tenants? And how does like the customer experience maybe differ for the two?
One side of that marketplace always has a shittier experience at some point in time in the early days than the other, because you have to focus on one. And the goal of network effects when you have a 2-sided marketplace usually come from you doubling down on servicing the demand side. The supply side. Thus, there's an assumption that the demand's always there. We picked a market where definitively in New York City, there's demand there. There's hundreds of thousands of units that rent annually. And there are millions of apartments that are rentable in New York City. So for us, we knew the demand didn't need focus because it was present. The supply side was our focus because it required the biggest learning curve. Landlords who historically for generations have leased the same way, using the same people and the same tools, changing their minds, we knew was the uphill battle. Still is today. I think it always will be, until we create something like a 2-sided marketplace of trust like Airbnb, where initially in 2008 to 2012, 4 or 5 years trying to convert strangers to then host other strangers in their homes. I mean, it was a foregone conclusion that no, that's crazy. Just like Uber, two-sided marketplace, where committing people who weren't business travelers, just normal mom and pops, to let their kids jump into cars with strangers was a foregone conclusion. No, that's crazy. And so for us, getting landlords, over these years to say, hey, I can trust this automated platform that is personless. It's not built on some chummy relationship. It's not built because we're the same religion or the same race or we come from the same community. And it's cost efficient. That is hard for landlords. So we have the same two-sided marketplace steps to take, like Airbnbs and Ubers of the world, where you have to convert both the demand and supply side to commit to this new way of operating. However, I think we did the right thing. We chose the supply side, and we serviced the demand side. So we really doubled down on trying to acquire assets from one and service the other. And then we tweak both till the point they're going to be in a congruent circle and they're going to have equally the same experience. But that experience, early days, you pick a horse. It's not going to be right. It's very much, PayPal is the best example to your question around you having to commit to a path and know that everything else you didn't commit to is going to fail. And that's okay. Because if you choose the path that best suits the business for growth, you'll have time to iterate on all the other paths that are good to haves, but they're not must haves. And we did the same thing. Anytime you have a two-sided marketplace, you have to do that same exercise. Pick the path that helps you grow, suffer in the short term for the ones that are broken, and you'll fix them along the way.
Yeah, and I guess prior to creating Rezi, I guess similar to Airbnb was the solution, like Craigslist.
Yeah, I think the reason why Craigslist has never had to really iterate or make a better looking UI is because Craigslist built the trust factor. Trust factor is everything. Craigslist is probably the best example of consumer trust, because if you log on today and you logged on 10 years ago, the feel is the same, the UI is the same, functionality is the same, the services are the same. The thing that Craig did was literally just expand the product base of offerings. So instead of hiring 100 engineers to make it look pretty, he built it such that it could sustain more and more optionality, right? And if you look at everyone else who went public, et cetera, they've always had to focus on trying to double down on user growth. Craigslist doubled down on consistency. So no matter how many people IPO around that marketplace, the Let Goes of the world, I mean, you and I can name 6 apps that let you buy and sell shit online, the eBays of the world, et cetera. Craig never had to IPO because it's just a money-making machine, and it probably is going to make money for a very long time. I mean, you still have cities where Craigslist is the best place to find housing. It's not Zumper, not Zillow, not Apartments.com, not Rezi. It's Craigslist still in a lot of markets. And so, every founder really should be looking at, when you build two-sided marketplaces, to have the goal of developing that trust factor and that continuity with your users, like Craigslist. Speaking of trust, Airbnb, I don't know if you saw the news, they just let go, or the VP of trust, she just stepped down in preparation to go public. So you're looking at a platform that is cutting staff that was focused on building that same trust factor just for the sake of going public, just for the sake of getting a capital outlay or capital infusion because they've lost so much revenue. Everyone has to take certain shortcuts, and it usually always comes out when they try to go public. Craigslist is the best example of when you stay private, you stay true to your North Star, what your growth looks like. Long-winded answer, but that's you triggered me right there, because I wish more of us, if 23 to 38 in the startup entrepreneur space, look at examples like Craigslist over anything else.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned a little bit earlier about like raising capital, and I know that you raised seed round. So I guess for you, like when it came to like raising venture funding, like what was the process like on deciding like, okay, venture funding is the best option for me versus like
well, really, it really wasn't. I think
yeah,
look, we've raised 4 or 5 times. I won't get into the numbers, but the path was simple. We started out bootstrapping all the money we had personally. I, will never tell a founder to do this, but I definitely just put every single dime up front in the very beginning, which was tough because playing the long game means I was broke for a very long time because I didn't think it would take as long to like make it work. My co-founders were much smarter. They kept their savings, or they had a lot of savings to live off of. But the first slug of capital, usually with any startup, from 0 to 50,000, usually comes out of the co-founders' pockets. When you cross the need of needing more than 50K, which is probably often more than the savings of the co-founders, that first 50 to 200,000 is like an angel round. And then once you cross, $250,000 more, you tend to get into pre-seed or seed. We didn't raise our seed until we got out of Y Combinator. So for us, we bootstrapped. We raised the angel round from friends and family, which was kind of like a blend, right? Like we bootstrapped. We had a friends and family round because the high net worth friends and family we had saw us bootstrap. So even though we didn't have revenue and a real hardcore product, the friends who still lived on Wall Street or still worked on Wall Street cut us checks early, pre-validation. They just took the bet on us. Then effectively you can consider we raised the angel round. And in lockstep, once we got into the Y Combinator, coming out of Y Combinator, we raised our seed round. Then after our seed round, we raised our Series A. And so, yeah, for us, the path was always incremental. So we've never been focused on a big number. We've always been focused on value add. Most founders today think of venture funding in terms of a necessity, and it has to be a big number. And that's just wrong. You're just asking for dilution and giving up control. For Rezi's perspective, we didn't really raise venture until we got into Silicon Valley and Y Combinator. So for us, seed was our first venture round. We learned a ton, but we did it, I think, the right way. Excuse me, in terms of how we diversified the investor batch and how much control we gave up. I think to answer your question at its core, Rezi's path isn't perfect, but I damn sure recommend it more than others to early stage founders because what we did was always focused on making the product work first. Most founders just have the idea, sketch it out, MVP, V1, and then want to go try to get $1.5 million, and believe that they need that to build the team to then effectuate the dream or the vision. And to me, just like when we first started this conversation, that's BS. If you can't make one person give you money for that idea, don't even try to think of raising money of any kind. First and second, don't raise money until you put your own money up into it. So as an angel investor, kid coming to me saying, this is what we've started with. This is a big picture vision. Here's all the analysis. And there's not a 0 to 1. It's not a first customer. No, it's not worth it. Now that's not 100% of cases, but to me, to even get the chops and the habit and the strength to really develop yourself as an entrepreneur, that mentality should always be somewhere in the early days. You focus solely on getting your first paying customer.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned earlier, like raising funding is not like your North Star, but given that you have raised funding, I guess one thing that people say is like, once you raise funding, you're basically like committing to an exit. So I guess like for you, like, what do you think that looks like? I know you mentioned like Apple prior, but
no, I disagree.
Okay.
That's bullshit. The reason why it's bullshit is because remember, VC's jobs is to create a return outsized greater than their investment. VC's hit ratio of how many times they actually invest in a company that earns those outsized returns is 1 of 10. VC's capital investment bets fail at almost the same rate as startups fail. Oftentimes, until you're much later stage, there's not a real super strong impression for an exit, because in your early stage investors, your pre-seed, seed, Series A, they really make money the next time you raise. They don't need necessarily an exit. Their value goes up the next time the valuation goes up. So again, as an early stage founder, having an exit mentality is also bullshit. You shouldn't even think that until you're like BC status, right? Um, and if you talk to investors at an early stage and you haven't even raised the seed, and those investors are talking about exit, they're the wrong people. Leave them alone. There's no value add. So to break down the answer I'm trying to give you, one, exit mentality should only be had when you're later stage. I think after like a C or D, think about it in terms of a focal point, right? An intention to exit. Up and through starting to like a late stage round, you should just be trying to build the business as big as possible. Two, if you're talking at an early stage to investors that are talking to you about exit, leave them alone because they're not value add and they're going to cost you more in your business because they're going to lead you down the wrong path. Three, when it comes to you as a founder trying to grow the business for capital raising, you're also going down the wrong path because effectively you're trying to financially engineer value by making the valuation higher for the next round. The business actually isn't doing anything more substantial. It isn't growing at a faster rate. So raising and building a startup just for the next raise will not equal an exit. So you're doing the wrong thing as well. So I think net, all the paths that were part of your question for early stage founders, my answer is that mentality is wrong. Most importantly, from someone that has raised multiple venture rounds, the best advice I can give you is that 90% of investors are bad for you. Literally only 10% actually add value. Only 10% actually can help you get to the next inflection point of growth, not the next round raised, the next inflection point where the business model scales to a certain degree. And so you have to be very judicious with your investors. And those conversations, again, are a distraction at a super early stage because they're not worth it, because the majority just want to see how they can invest for an exit. Rarely do you get the ones early stage who want to help you build. But when you do, double down and keep them in your round, which is why we've had some investors that have been with us from, Y Combinator till now, versus us spreading ourselves thin and trying to go to the world.
Yeah. And I guess from this conversation, it seems like your goal is really to build like a great product and a sustainable business. So I know like numbers aren't everything, but are there any metrics that you track to help inform decisions that you believe are important to startups?
I think numbers are everything, right? Yeah. I think when you have a North Star, all North Stars are quantifiable to some degree, right? So if you want to build a phenomenal product, your net promoter score means something. The percentage of how you deal with user issues on your support ticketing system matter. How fast you are converting, how fast you're growing your top of sales funnel, how much you're growing your percentage of conversion from top of funnel to bottom of funnel, and how much you're increasing your conversion of bottom of funnel to close and revenue in. They all matter because they all speak to this larger North Star of customer service. However, they're not the sole driver, right? There's a balance. You can't just say to yourself, customer growth and user activity makes us valuable. And you also just can't say revenue in and of itself makes us more valuable, because if revenue is not sustainable, you'll fail. If customers can't be converted from free to paid, you'll fail. So there's always this balance as early stage founder that you have to focus on. However, my point is, when you're early stage, all you need to focus on is your product growth by users that love it. That's it. I don't care if you have 10 or 15 users. Are they all daily active? Are they super committed? Are they consistently paying? Do you have them on annual subscriptions, right? If you're a SaaS business, that's way more meaningful than a 500 person wait list or a 3,500 person beta test list, right?
Okay, yeah, that's very insightful. And I know we only have 5 more minutes, so I guess
you have all the time you need to take. If you have more questions, let's keep going.
Yeah, the recording's gonna stop though. But yeah. So I guess, can you tell us about some resources that have been beneficial on your journey to helping create and build Rezi, or even your other startup? Yeah.
YouTube, Google, YouTube. Literally, there's no better education you can get than YouTubing hours and hours and hours of founders, VCs, entrepreneurs of all kinds in the tech startup space, not the ones hawking sales platforms and trying to get you to sign up for their classes and trying to get you to pay $500 to take their courses. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the fact that you can Google Y Combinator and you can literally watch their entire course on how to start a startup. You can Google 500 startups and you can see hundreds of talks that VCs and prominent startup founders and entrepreneurs have given. You can Google the fireside chats of every unicorn founder in the last 10 years being asked the same questions. How'd you do it? Like for me, I think the best thing we ever did was self-teach. That's it. If you don't have the propensity to get up a learning curve on your own that you source and develop on your own, you're going to fail. Because when you start a startup, there is nobody handing you a plate of academic knowledge. There's no tutorial. When you get to a point of getting into an accelerator, yeah, the learning curve is steep because the resources are there. But to get into an accelerator, you have to have more than just an idea. So something has to work and be functioning before you get to that point. Getting from zero to something functioning, 0 to your first customer, 0 to your first payment, that is self-taught. That's where you literally seek knowledge, YouTube, Google, and you iterate and practice based on all this free education that's on there. I'm be candid with you. I'm eating my own lunch. When we were prepping to interview for Y Combinator, all we did for like 2 days straight was watch previous YC interviews and recaps on YouTube. 2 days straight. No bullshit. 3 of us. We rented an Airbnb in Mountain View and we just like sat there on a Mac and just pounded hours. And then we practiced, then we watched, then we practiced, then we watched, then we practiced. It's that simple. YouTube.
That's pretty cool. I love YouTube. I didn't know. Well, yeah, YouTube is definitely a great resource. So I guess one thing, yeah. One, also you're a FAMU grad. I guess we have to acknowledge that given this is an HBCU podcast. Yes. And I hopefully, I guess a lot more of us HBCU students get into like the startup and entrepreneurship space.
Yeah. Well, look, I hope too. And what it will take is HBCUs breaking from their historical norm of only preparing students for corporate America.
Yeah.
You have to break that first. If business schools and engineering schools are still helping you prep for solely corporate America work, you won't have a bunch of founders coming out of school other than the kids that already have the chops.
Yeah.
Right? Other than the kids that kind of already come into school and they're with the shits. They really don't care about getting straight A's. They kind of know college is kind of bullshit from an academic success standpoint because they're not trying to engineer a corporate gig. And every single school year at every single HBCU, there's always those kids that exist. But oftentimes school tries to beat that out of them and make them assimilate. And I'm one of those kids at FAMU. I didn't care about being a great student. I really didn't care in assimilation either. And so I've always been a little bit a lot bit anti. I just knew how to play the game such that I did get a corporate gig out of school. I did build, 7, 8 years on Wall Street doing specifically commercial real estate finance before I branched out to start my first company. I tell you what though, at the end of the day, the best thing I took from school was nothing from a classroom. It was all relationships. My co-founder and I have known each other since we were 18 from FAMU. That's the best thing that came out of school. And so for early stage kids now, HBCUs, those relationships are everything. Build those more than you focus on A's.
Okay, definitely. Thank you for that knowledge. And I think overall, thank you for taking time out of your day and then also spreading knowledge about your journey to building Rezi and everything else in between. So thank you.
You're welcome.